Welcome back to Creative Excuses, where we make excuses to be creative out of the video games that we play. I thought account-wide achievements would keep me away, but I just like building an ESO too much. So here we are with another new build, and this one is crazy. Just like my hybrid 1-bar Necromancer, the full build is going to be in the description down below. There you'll find the gear, skills, passives, champion points, consumables, and a basic idea for how the rotation works, even though it's not that complicated. In the video, I will not be going over every detail found in the written build because the video is not a guide. This video is a challenge. I want you to go out there and be creative with your own builds and maybe give this crazy idea a shot. Before we jump into the theme, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to see more ESO build challenges like this one. Also, I live stream with my wife over on twitch.tv/creativeexcuses 3 days a week. Come hang out while I make builds and play a variety of games and make excuses to be creative. We'd love to see you there. All right, let's jump into it. Like usual, the first thing I do when I make a build is pick my theme or my concept. In this case, it's a theme. And this theme I picked a while ago, but with the new Ascending Tide DLC, I was super excited to update this build. The theme is the Night of Madness. The whole concept for this build, the first time I made it, was to use stats the wrong way. Basically, at the time, there were only a few skills in the game that scaled off of your highest offensive stats. There were light attacks, heavy attacks, and ultimates. These always scaled off your highest offensive stats, regardless of damage type, unless otherwise stated where they scale off like your resistances or something. But then there were also a few select skills that would also scale this way. These were skills like Twisting Path from the Nightblade trees, the 2 offensive tether abilities that Necromancers have, Ritual of Retribution from the Templar skills, and so on. At the time, I was most familiar with the Templar, and I knew that I would be able to make a heavy attack build on a Templar, which would be necessary to make this kind of thing work, where I was a stamina build that dealt almost exclusively magic damage. It was a cool build, and it worked. It got me through veteran Vateshran Hollows, but with plenty of finger pain from holding down left click. But it did get the job done. Side note, this build showed me that I can't really do heavy attack builds because of hand pain. And it was the reason that I made this gross looking thing to attach to my mouse. I call it a mouse slug. Comment below if you have finger pain from clicking too much or too hard, and let me know if you want the shortest video ever on how to make one of these. It's not very hard, but it works. It forces my finger to bend when I click or when I hold down click, so that the last joint in my pointer doesn't hurt when I'm heavy attacking as much. Also, there's a link to that sick mousepad in the description. Okay, back to the build. Fast forward a couple patches from making this Shoegorath themed Templar, and now all offensive abilities scale with your highest offensive stats. So I am now free of the cool but painful heavy attack playstyle. The theme is still to use our stats the wrong way, to be a Night of Madness, but now we have a new twist. To be truly mad in this game, to let your madness shine, you can't just be a weird Templar. You have to be unarmed. So our theme isn't just a Night of Madness, it is an unarmed, no weapon Night of Madness for solo play. Do not take this into trials or vet DLC dungeons. You will get kicked, and it's not my fault. Although if you take it into a normal dungeon, you'll actually probably deal plenty of damage for a normal dungeon. You'll still probably get kicked though. So here is the build challenge. I want you to figure out how to make a mismatched stat build for any role with a ton of bonus points if you can make it work without a weapon. But only for solo builds, please. Again, if you use an unarmed build in group play, you're gonna get kicked. Unless you and a group of friends make 4 unarmed builds and go and tackle a dungeon. Then, all the bonus points, you'll get a pinned comment. Make this build with one of your most familiar classes, and then when you're done with it, post it in the comments. Remember, this is all inspired by weird game mechanics and weird math that's going on, and good old Uncle Shio. So make it wacky. Now, how did I make this work? There are obviously some problems that had to be solved. The first problem is how to fulfill the theme. Unequipping a weapon is easy enough, but how are we going to make our stats as weird as possible? There were a few options. I could make a stamina mage or a magicka stamina build? No idea how to say that. Basically, I could make our damage stamina based, or magicka based while using the opposite resource for actually casting our abilities. At first, I tried to just make an unarmed DPS for group play, using magicka as our damage stat pool, because I could get that pool to around 40,000, which is pretty solid. But then I realized that if I release an unarmed DPS build and people start using it for fun, I'm going to be the scourge of the earth, getting people kicked left and right from their groups. So I decided to make a solo build, but making it the way that I was working on it before, I couldn't make it tanky enough with enough healing that way for solo play. Mainly because the Ring of the Pale Order wasn't an option because I only have 10 equipment slots. So I decided to go back to being a stamina stacking mage. So this Knight of Madness is just so buff that she can cast spells by flexing. Another advantage to going with the stamina based mage was that I could break the stats even more by stacking spell damage on the jewelry to have mismatching damage stats, while buffing up spell damage even higher with Templar's Minor Sorcery, even though I didn't end up doing that. Problem number 2. I lied in that last section. I wasn't only going to be the Scourge of the Earth by encouraging people to play in groups without weapons, I also just couldn't get the magicka-based Templar to sustain while maintaining the theme. I had to use too many magicka abilities, and at that point, it was just a derpy hybrid build, and that's not what I wanted. This was even while using 3 sustain glyphs on the jewelries, taking synergies while on the trial dummy, using good potions with medicinal use, and abusing the crap out of the high elf sustain passive. If I'd switched over to more medium armor on the build, I think I could have made the stamina sustain work, but it still just didn't feel right. So I went back to the drawing board for a buff mage. But sustain was still a challenge. I would have loved to use 2 or 3 spell damage glyphs, but I just couldn't sustain it in a single target fight. So I sacrificed some damage glyphs for sustain glyphs. We've got 2 recovery glyphs and 1 line of recovery on one of my sets. And even then, to make the build work with only 2 recovery glyphs, I did have to sacrifice a tiny bit of the theme and use 1 stamina skill. However, that skill is still scaling with stamina and spell damage, so it's still broken. We'll call it even. We also have 1 more fun sustain tool, which is the High Elf passive Spell Recharge, which will restore our magicka, which is our main casting resource, because that resource pool is much smaller than our stamina pool. High Elves make great Knights of Madness because of this passive, and it's a super fun sustain tool to manipulate like this. Alright, problem number 3 is the one that you've all been waiting for. Damage. How in the actual crap do you deal enough damage to solo veteran Vateshran Hollows without a weapon? Well, that's a good question. First though, we're going to need to understand how it is that we deal damage in the game. Step 1, hit the boss. Step 2, maths. The math part is the important part, so I'm going to describe a little bit about how it works, just so we're all on the same page. In ESO, there are generally 3 ways to increase your damage using stats. First, you can just make bigger stat pools. Stacking stamina and weapon damage really high makes you do bigger numbers. These stat pools go at the beginning of the damage calculations and help our ability tooltips scale higher. When the number goes up, it means the damage number goes up. Cool. Second, you can stack percentage-based modifiers really high. Critical damage is the most common percentage-based boost and is just a more complicated version of a boost like Major or Minor Berserk, Vulnerability, the Deadly Strike set, Boss Ace Mania, your percentage-based champion points, etc. These boosts are applied at the end of damage calculations, so they benefit most when your base damage is higher. The third kind of damage modifier is the most important for us: flat damage bonuses. These go in the middle of our damage calculation and usually don't show up on the stat sheets except for specific circumstances. This kind of damage modifier is real life magic because they get affected by percentage modifiers like crits, and they allow crazy things like 20,000 damage ticks of a lightning staff heavy attack, or a 40,000 damage critical hit power slam from somebody like Fragment Sol. However, these flat damage bonuses are rare, but there are a few that may be able to help us here. The first is from the Dragon's Appetite set. Look at that 5-piece bonus. Increase your damage done to bleeding enemies by 225. This sounds like a small amount, but this affects every instance of damage that we deal, and we're a Templar. We have Puncturing Sweeps as our main spammable that hits 5 times per second, 4 times, plus Burning Light passive, plus our light attack before each ability, plus each of our Blazing Spears, and any status effects that we apply. That means we are getting a minimum of 7 hits in per second, all benefiting from this bonus. That's a good 1400 damage per second before our percentage-based modifiers. Plus, we can get a nice heal from it every few seconds. That sounds amazing. Just one problem. A Templar without a weapon has no access to bleed damage that I'm aware of. Only the Warden has bleed damage in their class kit. Everything else is from weapons, sets, or werewolf abilities. And the problem with using a set is those scale off our weapon damage, which is really low because we're missing like 1500 of it from not having a freaking weapon. So crap. But there is another set like this, and it's for magicka users, and it is perfect. Draugrkin's Grip. This is our damage solution. Look at the beautiful 5-piece bonus. 617 extra damage from all of your damaging abilities. Sure, it's only single target, fine. And sure, it's only up 2/3 of the time, which means it averages like 411 damage added per hit over its 9-second cycle. But that's still pretty freaking sick. Remember, we're getting at least 7 hits per second with just 2 abilities in our punches. So that's over 2800 DPS added just from this set. Adding in more damage over time skills will increase the amount of damage per second. And on top of all this, it has great stats for us. It boosts our penetration, gives us some extra sustain through the magicka and the recovery lines. It is a perfect set for us. Our other damage set is less exciting, admittedly. Hunding's Rage, crafted in light armor. The stats on it are pretty perfect for the build, and we can have it in light armor. Perfect. Side note, I did not use Hunding's Rage in my final clear of veteran Vateshran Hollows. I used 4 pieces of Night Mother's Gaze with a Krog monster helm. Hunding's Rage, however, will be better because 280 weapon damage is worth more than the 1400 penetration in this case, and the extra 3% crit, because penetration and crit are both percentage-based modifiers. We want as much flat and base damage modifiers as we can get because we're missing so much from lacking a weapon. Alright, on to the last one. Healing. Honestly, this may be a problem, but I have to go test the build to make sure one way or another. Be right back. Okay, so healing isn't a huge problem, but because our healing is based on our damage, it is not great. You just have to make sure you clear out the adds as soon as possible, which will help with handling the DPS checks in veteran Vateshran, and in other places just hit a big group of enemies and you'll probably be fine. And kite, definitely kite and strafe stuff, you know? You'll also need to minimize casting abilities that are not puncturing sweeps, because casting anything else, unless it's a heal, takes away from your healing. I also used the From the Brink champion point node in order to give myself an 11k shield if I dropped below 25% health once every 30 seconds, and this is a huge lifesaver, especially in the last fight in veteran Vateshran. The only other healing tools that I used were, of course, puncturing sweeps, the Templar rune on the ground, and another champion point node from the fitness tree called Strategic Reserve, which gives you 30 health recovery for every 10 ultimate you have. So you can save up your ultimate for a little bit extra healing and then choose to use it when you need a bit of burst damage. It's super helpful and gives you just enough healing to make it through veteran Vateshran with some trouble, but you can do it. If you do want to use this build, it's going to be a challenge to clear Vet Vateshran Hollows, but it is possible and definitely worth a shot. It took me roughly 30 tries, unfortunately, even though I cleared out the other bosses relatively easily. So if you want an easier time, of course, just slap on any weapons that you want. You can even put on just one main hand sword and you'll be fine. You can use a restoration staff if you want to. The added stats alone will make it easy and make you so much stronger. So there we go. That is the theme of this super fun build and the way that I solved the many problems that it presented. It was not as challenging as I thought it would be, honestly, but that's probably because it's just an unarmed magicka Templar with some funky stats, and a magicka Templar is already a really good solo class. Kind of an overpowered solo class, I would say. But you know what? I'm okay with that. It is still a Knight of Madness, and when I decided to throw on a lightning staff of my choice, it's actually the strongest solo build I have made yet, which is wild. Alright everyone, if you liked the video, like the video, and then subscribe so you can catch the new and upcoming build challenges that I'm working on. I've got a new Sorcerer, a Dragon Knight, and a new Mountaineer themed Warden coming out soon. Also, come check out the stream to say hi. Shelby and I stream on 3 nights a week, Wednesday nights, Sunday nights, and one more night that we haven't decided on, but we'd love to see you there. With that, I'll see you all in the next excuse.